That would be great. And we'll be set to go here shortly. So
there we go.
hey, thank you. So, but
we are live streaming to YouTube too, Lori.
Correct. Good. We had a few people join us last month on YouTube, and that was a great first attempt, and we're looking forward to making HomeNE more available to individuals. So if you're joining us, this is HomeNE, and before we begin today, I just want to share some important dates as we're onboarding more individuals. Coming up, starting next week on May 27th, the Nebraska Investment Finance Authority is starting a weekly summer webinar series, Networking with NIFA and Conference Connections. It's a weekly webinar, I believe, and just check out that link for registration information. On June 17th and 18th, our friends in South Dakota called Dakota Resources are hosting their first ever virtual Rural X conference. And so that will be taking place, and registration is also required of that. I am actually registered. Some people from McCook went to the actual conference last year and said it was great. So I'm looking forward to that as well. And then on July 17th, NIFA has another deadline for housing study grant applications. So if you're thinking of doing a housing study or updating an existing housing study, you'll want to check that out. There is some cost share requirements on that, but it's a great way to accelerate your housing study process. And then on June 29th, the pre-applications are due for the Department of Economic Development's owner-occupied rehab program. If you're thinking of submitting a formal application, just be aware that pre-applications for that are required. So in any or all of these, feel free to reach out to us or to your own economic development district or your staff for more information, and check out the websites as well. So Chelsea mentioned that they received a housing study grant up in Box Butte County, I believe. So feel free to check out her comments in the chat box at the bottom. So, okay, I want to go ahead and just give our thanks to NIFA and the Department of Economic Development for our partnerships that we have with them. We appreciate both of the agencies and their staff members for the work that they do daily to promote housing opportunities across the state, and kudos to all of you for the work that you do. So I want to go ahead and honor everybody's time and get us started today. We have a total of 104 attendees, I believe, today. Great numbers once again, and we thank you for that. Our agenda for the day, Sherry, if you want to show that slide. Okay. Will be State Senator Matt Williams is going to be speaking on the Rural Workforce Housing Program and the success stories, as well as giving us some history and maybe touching on a couple of other topics. Of the 104 people that are joining us today, I just want to mention that we have 13 first-time attendees. So welcome to HomeNE. You're going to hear a great presenter in Senator Williams. Following his presentation, we will be opening up a time of questions for the speaker. I know he's got maybe a few for us as well, so I'm looking forward to that time, as well as a group discussion and final thoughts. We'll be setting aside some time for that as well. So whether you're joining us for your very first time, or if you're joining us for a regular HomeNE event, we just want to say thank you. We are grateful. You're kind of the support that we always need to make this happen, and so we are grateful indeed for all of that. So before I turn it over to Sharon to introduce the state senator, I just want to mention that the chat box is available. Some of you are already using that. Feel free to use that to drop in your questions for the senator or to ask us questions. We will monitor that and present your questions to the senator after he concludes his presentation. So HomeNE is a learning network, and we do all learn best when we interact and engage with each other. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sharon Heffley, the Executive Director here at South Central Economic Development District. Sharon?
All right, thanks, Lori. Welcome, everybody. We're glad you're here. We wish at some point we can, or hope we can be together and actually shake hands again and speak to each other face to face. But for now, this will work, and we're glad you're here. This is the May edition of the HomeNE 2020 webinar series. The South Central Economic Development District is the lead agent for these monthly webinars and semi-annual gatherings. However, you'll notice we haven't had that semi-annual for spring. We postponed, and put it on hold, and it may just be an annual gathering this year, no promises. But what is HomeNE? HomeNE is a learning network that was established in 2017 with people like you in mind. Our purpose is to build a network of individuals and communities with a shared interest in assessing and addressing housing issues in rural communities, to provide a safe space to be vulnerable about what's been tried, and to find motivation to take one more step in the right direction, to learn from the successes and struggles of others, to take away new ideas or see things through a new lens, and to inspire you. What you're doing is valuable. No one can or will do it quite like you, and now is the time to leave your mark on the universe. So today we'll be hearing from State Senator Matt Williams. Matt is the chairman of Flatwater Bank, a $220 million community bank with headquarters in Gothenburg, Nebraska. He's a fourth-generation banker and has been with the family-owned bank since 1973. Must have started when you were 10, huh? So, Matt became a state senator representing Legislative District 36 in 2015, and he was reelected in 2018. He currently serves as the chairman of Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee, and he serves on Health and Human Services Committee, the Legislature's Planning Committee, and the Legislature's Economic Development Task Force. He was chairman of the American Bankers Association in 2012 and 13 and served on the American Bankers Association board. Matt's been a member of the ABA Government Relations Council, served on the ABA State Grassroots Coordinator for the state of Nebraska, and he was selected as one of 14 bankers from across the country to serve on the FDIC Advisory Committee on Community Banking. Matt was chairman of the Nebraska Bankers Association in 2003 and 4 and has served on many MBA committees. He was appointed by the University of Nebraska Board of Regents to the Board of Directors of Innovation Campus. He also serves as a trustee of the University of Nebraska Foundation and the UNL Ag Builders. He's a past member of the University of Nebraska President's Advisory Council, the University of Nebraska Finance Department Advisory Board, and is a past director of the State Chamber of Commerce. He also served as state director for the Tom and Nancy Osborne Teammates Mentoring Program. Matt's been involved with economic development in Gothenburg and Dawson County, formerly serving as chairman of the Gothenburg Improvement Company and president of the Gothenburg Area Chamber of Commerce. He received the Alumni Achievement Award from UNL in 2013 and the ABA Ag Banker of the Year Award in 2014, a Friend of the Court Award from the Nebraska Judiciary for work on problem-solving courts in 2017, and the Nebraska Alumni Association Public Service Award in 2019. Matt received his undergraduate and law degrees from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He and his wife, Susan, have 2 children and 6 grandchildren. And Senator, welcome to our HomeNE network.
Well, Sharon, thank you very much for that kind introduction. I appreciate that. Who would have guessed a few months ago when you asked me if I would be able to speak to your group that we would be doing it under these circumstances that we are. But here we are. I would like to, first of all, thank South Central for hosting this and the other supporters that Lori listed, because these kind of events are very important and the organizations behind them are important. But more important than even that are each one of you that have taken your time to be on this call today to try to learn something and try to steal something from some of your neighbors to be able to have your community grow, have your area prosper into the future. Life has changed. This is the first time I put on a tie since the session was called off back in March. And it's probably the longest period of time that I have not worn a tie since 1973, as Sharon mentioned, when I started in banking. It's also the longest period of time that I've ever gone without a haircut since the 70s, when I did have longer hair. But that's a problem for another day. But each one of us has had to change our lives. We've watched our kids in school. We've watched our churches. We've watched our medical providers and our medical facilities all change. We've each done it in our own particular businesses. In fact, we spent about 2 hours on a Zoom call this morning with bank employees talking about how we are going to reopen our banking operation. And I thought when we were doing that, that's just like everybody else is going through right now. Figuring out how you're going to do this in a way that is safe for your employees, safe for your customers, and not putting people at risk. And we oftentimes through this period of time get focused on what I call the negative kind of things, the stinking thinking that goes on when times are like this. And what I have noticed during this is a tremendous resiliency of people stepping up, accepting responsibility to move their community forward, move their business forward, do those right kind of things. I'm also a believer that through these difficult and challenging times, there are opportunities. And one of the things that I would mention right now is we have now seen the rebirth or the new birth of telehealth and telemedicine in our state and across the country. I believe that's something that's going to serve us extremely well into the future, in particular in some of our more remote rural areas of the state where we don't have all the same access to healthcare providers eye to eye. But through telehealth and the resurgence of that now, we'll have that opportunity. I would say the same thing. This has pointed out the real weaknesses that we have in some of our rural areas with broadband connectivity. And there's been an emphasis with legislative efforts and investment to correct those issues in our state. But there's nothing like having a daughter that's a high school teacher that all of a sudden gets home, but she lives on the farm. And now, while she's trying to provide education to all of her math students in high school, she also has her freshman college student home living with her and 2 other high school kids. And the broadband just doesn't cut it. So I think we now can see those challenges. The one challenge I would point out that I think is a tremendous opportunity for us in the future is where we are going to go with my favorite topic, economic development. There is no doubt that our country has realized that relying on foreign countries to produce necessary items that we use daily for our livelihood in our country is not where this country wants to be, nor it should be for the long term. There are going to be significant economic development opportunities for states that put themselves in the right position for the future. I've had many conversations over the last couple of months with economic development people and state senators and representatives of the executive branch of government about that exact thing. Many states and many people will choose to crawl into a hole right now and recognize that the phone isn't ringing necessarily today for economic development activities, but it's going to start ringing again. And when it does, our state needs to give you the tools so that you can be in the right spot to make those investments that will make a difference long term. So I think there is a bright future for that. Speaking of giving tools, that's what we're going to talk about today a little bit is workforce development and the tools that were developed starting back in 2017 with LB 518 to provide opportunities for communities, development districts, other nonprofits across our state. The title of what we're talking about today is Success Stories. Now, if you really wanted to know the success stories, you'd need to talk to Sharon or Cheryl Hyatt from DED, who is on the call today, about the very specific programs that have been out there. But what I'd like to do is talk about an overview so that we gain a sense of importance for this topic and recognize that as successful as 518 has been, only 14 development companies were able to take advantage of it. And you might have been lucky enough to be one of those, but many who applied were not, and many were not ready to apply. So what I hope we can do by the end of today is encourage each of you to put yourself in a position that when, not if, when more funds are available through a grant program like 518, you'll be ready to get there and get it done. We spend a significant amount of time in the legislature talking about growing our state, moving our state forward, finding a better future for our state. Oftentimes that discussion talks about tax policy, economic incentives, access to quality education and healthcare. We are fortunate in Nebraska. We are recognized nationally with our business practices. We have had normally low unemployment. Right now, we have over 100,000 people unemployed in the state. So there are people out there looking for jobs. We also have a great work ethic and all the kind of things that you know and that you sell when you have a chance to be talking to a recruit. Through this whole period of time, one of the factors that I think was overlooked in an effort to attract employees and employers is the access to quality, affordable housing. Each one of you, I'm sure, has run into that and recognized that has been a barrier to recruitment. That has been a barrier for not only new recruitment, but for our schools, our hospitals, our nursing homes, the co-op, you name it in your community. They've had a struggle recruiting people because of the lack of access to affordable housing. Many times jobs are going unfilled across our state simply because there isn't that access to affordable quality housing. It's important to understand, and this is a job that I've had a difficult task with in the legislature. It's difficult for people to understand that workforce housing is different than affordable housing. In fact, we should probably come up with a better term like middle income housing that we should use instead of workforce housing. When I talk to some senators, when you say workforce housing, they're thinking of affordable housing type programs or low income housing. And that's not really what we're talking about. We have programs for affordable housing, but we're trying to fill that gap for those people that don't qualify for affordable housing, yet want a quality house. And we've had some stumbling blocks that are somewhat unique to Nebraska and are more accentuated in rural areas of our state than others. Oftentimes, workforce housing, like I said, creates projects to close the gap, the difference between the cost of housing and what a middle income wage earner can afford. Median income in Nebraska in 2017 was $56,000, and about 57% of Nebraskans were deemed to be middle class or middle income class. So between 2014 and 2017, median income in Nebraska increased by 8%. Decent increase. Problem, the median home prices during that same period of time rose 28%. And so you had this problem of income not keeping up with the increase in price of housing. In addition to rising home values, we're also trying to address the issue of low housing inventory. In Nebraska, this is startling to me. In Nebraska, the number of households that we have is increasing faster than the number of houses that we are building. Think about that. Our households, so our need for housing, is increasing at a rate faster than we are building homes. I have relied a great deal over the past number of years for the Center for Public Affairs Research conducted by Dr. Josie Schaefer at University of Nebraska, Omaha. They work very closely with the legislature, in particular the planning committee of which I serve on, and they have put together a report that I know that Sharon and Lori are going to send out to all of you concerning middle income housing. And in that report, for the years 2009, 2010, 2012, 14, and 2018, fewer homes again were built than we had households. Not the place to be. Recognizing all this, and through a great deal of work by many people on this call and many bankers and other people across our state, a study was done on workforce housing in the 2015 and 16 timeframe. And following that was the advent of legislation that I introduced, LB 518, which is the Rural Workforce Housing Investment Act that was passed by the legislature. The program was designed to help communities fill this gap and expand the availability of housing options for employees. Specifically, the bill created a grant program to stimulate housing development in rural Nebraska. This type of activity that a nonprofit development corporation could engage in included loan guarantees, purchase or rental guarantees, credit enhancement to reduce the cost of workforce housing, and a lot of other things that ingenious developers came up with. That we left that very flexible in 518, and those applications were submitted to DED and had to qualify. But most importantly, to ensure that the program was going to work right and that communities had skin in the game, the bill required a dollar-for-dollar match on the part of all grant applications. 518 was a roaring success. We were overwhelmed with applications. Approximately 3 times the amount of dollars that were available to the program were applied for. When we first introduced 518, we were able to borrow, I'll use that term loosely, $7 million from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, dollars that were not being used at that time for investment into affordable housing. And we used that as the state's match. Communities that were awarded grants matched that and actually exceeded that and invested over $10 million in their portion. And 14 recipients were awarded. There were many more than that applied, many more dollars, but the DED and Cheryl and her group went through a process of picking those that were the best applications, and away we went. Through that period of time, over 570 new housing units have either been built or are still being planned to be built. Tremendous success all across the state. I'll say nearly all across the state. The furthest projects to the west were North Platte. And for those of you in eastern Nebraska, North Platte is not in western Nebraska. It's in south central Nebraska. So we didn't get any applications awarded for the further west part of the state, but hopefully that can happen the next time. Importantly with this, the investment that was made amounted to nearly $100 million of new construction for those 577 units in the state. So for an investment by the state of $7 million one time, we have built over $100 million of brick and mortar, and all but one of the programs that has been awarded are set up in such a way that the money is reused. And that is something that's really, really important. So that's the gift that we'll continue to keep giving as we go forward. Knowing that project was a success, knowing that there was additional demand for the project, I introduced LB 773 in the session of the legislature that's currently in recess until now, we have found out, July 20th. And we had a hearing in front of the Appropriations Committee on LB 773 to ask for an additional $10 million of state funding to redo the program and to continue to fill the need that is out there. A number of people that you know came and testified at that hearing. Sharon testified. Caitlin Jarabic from St. Paul testified. Dave Rippey, who was the head of DED, as you know, but came as a economic developer from the Hastings area, testified, as did Cliff Messner from Central City. We did a good job, I think, of selling the importance of LB 773. In fact, we did such a good job that Senator Stinner, chairman of the Appropriations Committee, came to me and suggested that he include the $10 million in the budget proposal. That was wonderful news for all of us. So that was included. The budget proposal that came to the floor of the legislature was advanced from the Appropriations Committee unanimously, again showing the support of the committee to this kind of development. And the budget was debated and was passed on general file and is now sitting on select file. And then we have a pandemic and we are sent home, and the economic climate for the state has changed. I have had numerous conversations with Senator Stinner, and Senator Stinner is of like mind that the LB 773 tucked into the budget is still very important for the future of Nebraska and should be maintained in the budget. But it will be a little bit of a struggle. But my suggestion for all of you on this call is to not get caught short on this, to recognize that there is a good likelihood that we can get that budget passed with the $10 million in it. And then again, it will open up the door for the future of applications through DED. And this time, I hope we overwhelm Cheryl Hyatt more than we even did the first time, so that there are plenty of applications. But this is your opportunity. And I think that is the primary message today. We can provide tools. And I believe that is the responsibility of the legislature, to provide tools. We can't force you to use them. We can encourage you to use them, but you can see success stories all across the state with LB 518. And there are people now to talk to that said, how did you do this? What did your application look like? How did you come up with the matching grant money? that you needed to come up with. And it may be for some challenging right now with the COVID situation going on. Raising money could be more difficult, but I again would tell you, I don't know if there's ever been a time of greater need for this than there is right now. So my encouragement is to move forward, recognize that you can talk to a number of people out there from different development companies that have used the award. We have some interesting developments right now due to COVID. I know of a project in central Nebraska that lost their funding for the tax increment financing portion that they had built into a project for a one-year period of time based on the COVID situation. And so they're working through that, and there will be challenges, but we can all make that happen. So with that, I would pause and see if there are some questions that people would like to ask of me or others that are on the call that could help you be better prepared for your future of your communities.
Sorry, having some muting issues there. Thank you, Senator Williams. I was just looking through the comments, and we've had some individuals sharing what's going on in their communities. Megan in the southwest part of the state has talked a little bit about the Southwest Nebraska Revolving Housing Fund that they're working on. They got funding through the Trust Fund Innovative Grant to do that. And Laura Husky has also mentioned and made some comments. So I just want to direct individuals to the chat box too. And if you have any questions for the Senator, we are going to open it up for what we're calling a virtual town hall with him, when you can ask questions of him, either by opening your microphone or entering those through the chat box. Steve does have a question here. With the doc stamp being the revenue source for the trust fund, was there a payback calculation from the $100 million construction / sales on the $7 million investment?
There were several paybacks, Steve, that we looked at that I talked to the Appropriations Committee back about. One is sales tax that was generated on the purchase of many items that went into the 100 million. Not all of that is taxable. Some of it was labor, but there's a portion there. We hope the people that were building the projects made a little money and maybe paid a little income tax. We certainly have round number 100 million going on the property tax rolls. So there was certainly payback there, but you're also right in pointing out that the original $7 million came from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That fund accumulates its money with doc stamps. And we never went further than that with that calculation for the future because we were not looking at that as a revenue source to provide funding for the grant program. Although I will tell you, in my file sitting right over here, I have an amendment to LB 773 that would have slightly increased the doc stamps for a period of time, 5 or 6 years, to provide funding for every 10, I think it's for every 10 cents of doc stamps increase, we raise about $1 million a year. So if we were to raise the doc stamps by 25 cents, we could raise about $2.5 million a year and have that earmarked for a program like the Housing Grant Program. The realtors of the state, I met with them. They were willing to consider something like that, not oppose it if it was going to workforce housing. But after significant discussions with the governor's office, they preferred putting this in the budget. One of the things that we have had happen is that this program is something that Governor Ricketts really likes. And so he has been sitting there side by side with us promoting this for the future.
Sarah asks in the chat box, and if you want to open your microphones, we love to hear your voices during this webinar. Feel free to open up and just ask the questions of the senator. But Sarah was wondering what other communities may be used as a source of matching funds. She's getting some comments perhaps in the chat box, but Senator, do you know of some sources of matching funds that were utilized in this process?
There were numerous sources that people used, all the way from straight raising money from the primarily the business community. There were some communities that used the accumulation of sales tax dollars. We had other communities have development property that they already owned that they converted to cash. The one thing that I would caution you on is that the match has to be cash. It can't be property itself under the current legislation. So those were some of the things. And maybe, again, I don't want to put her on the spot, but Cheryl Hyatt is on the, from DED is on the call, and she might be able to add some insight into that.
Sure. Thank you, Senator Williams. I think you covered most of it. The LB 840 funds, several communities used that. Several did do fundraising. Contributions from businesses, employers, and banks was very common. Some communities really had a long laundry list of those donations. So I think you do have it pretty well covered.
Okay. Kathy, if I am misunderstanding your question, please chime in and correct me, but the question is about investing in new build homes versus restoring older homes in rural areas. Is it strictly for new construction, or can we do some restoration, maybe some purchase, rehab, resale provisions with funds? What is allowed, or what's been happening in those areas?
Almost everything is available there. It can be single family housing, multifamily, new construction, or rehab. The dollar limits in the bill, I think, were maximum $275,000 for a single family home. On renovations, if I'm remembering it correctly, it had to be at least you had to increase the value by at least 50%. I think that's what it was that we landed on with that. But it can be rehab also, and I think that's important to look at.
Okay, great.
We also have legislation that is pending. It probably won't get anywhere because of the session this year that is directed specifically at rehab. Almost all of our communities have older properties that are run down that we need to do something with. And we have some legislation proposed to allow for a special type of tax increment financing to do some of those projects.
Okay. Okay.
Senator, this is Cliff Messner. Talking about local or matching funds, one of the things I think that needs to be mentioned that was a very important part for the communities we worked in last year was NYFA's willingness to contribute the first 250, because that really allowed communities to leverage it up in a hurry. So I wanted to make sure that was out there.
Thank you, Cliff. As soon as I clicked mute, I thought of that.
I appreciate bringing that up, and again showing what a great partner they have been in this whole process.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I could just address a little bit about new construction, and maybe Cheryl and Cliff will have more to add to this, new construction versus rehab. Thinking about Kathy's question, I'm with her. I feel like there is so much, and I see that in the comments. I saw that with Box Butte County. They're talking about how much rehab they need, and even some demolition of some of the properties that can't be rehabbed. because of the parameters of this fund, you needed to be turning it over within 24 months. In our opinion, we thought we had a little more control over new construction first time around. But as we move forward, we will be focusing on rehab too. And we do have one older home that was rehabbed and just sold. It came on the market for a big 2-story house in downtown, or just north of downtown Holdridge, came on the market for $255,000 and sold within a week. So we're excited about that. But for us, we went after new construction first, just because we felt maybe we could control the timing a little more in getting the funds invested, so that we are able to keep them. But we will be using it more for rehab. And we too use NIFA for a portion of our funding. We raised the money through some donations. SCED put up a significant amount themselves, and then we were able to get NIFA funding to help match it.
Good. As you're continuing to think of questions for the Senator, I'll just mention he did reference the UNO Center for Rural Affairs research, or excuse me, public affairs, that was titled the Middle Income Housing Report. We have that available, as he mentioned, and we will be making that available to all of you via an email at the conclusion of this webinar, along with the recording of today's session. So be looking.
Lori, I would point out with that, that document, which is a very short document, has a lot of meat to it, and it will be extremely helpful for you if you're going in front of a redevelopment authority or your city council to talk about what these real needs are. And when you see those statistics, it's pretty startling. And you know it's in your community too. So that's a great document, and really appreciate Dr. Schaefer and all of her team for helping put that together for us.
Good, and thank you for making it available to us to distribute. Rick wants to know if you could share again the recipients of the LB 518 funds.
I sure can. I will just quickly read the list. It's Neighborhood Works from Northeast Nebraska, Schuyler Community Development, Greater Fremont Development Corporations, Hastings Economic Development Corporation, York County Development Corporation, Holdridge Development Corporation, South Central Development District, Central Nebraska Economic Development, SEND, S-E-N-D Incorporated, MAPA Foundation, Wayne Community Housing Development, Economic Development Council of Buffalo County, Kearney, Lincoln County Community Development Corporation, and the North Platte Area Chamber and Development Corporation. Those are the 14 that were awarded. My county, Dawson County, made application. They made a mistake on their application as far as their match. They knew it, so they didn't get one. And John Stinner, chairman of the appropriations committees, he's from Scotts Bluff. They made the application and they didn't get accepted. So we expect that if we pass LB 773 in the budget, that both Dawson County and Stinner's district will get some kind of award. Did you hear that, Cheryl?
All we need is a quality application that outscores the others.
Okay, on that note, what was next here?
I am so excited. I've been monitoring the chat box and getting a little distracted reading all the wonderful comments, but the purpose of HomeNE is taking place in the chat box. I've seen several people saying, we got to connect to talk about what you're doing in your community. And so emails are being shared and comments are being given. And so I'm so excited. And Brian just put in the chat box the link to the recipient award list. So we are all very appreciative. That's what HomeNE is really all about. And so it does our heart good, I think, today to just see all of that taking place. So what other questions do you have for the Senator?
This is Matthew Kavanaugh. So thank you, Senator, for the time, and thank you, Sharon and Lori, as always, for hosting this. Senator, I'm just wondering if you could give us any specific direction on what we can do to get this across the line? You've done you've done an outstanding job of getting it this far, and that hearing was excellent. And it showed the
well, if you and you may have some influence on a senator or two, so if you can get them to,
yeah.
No, I'm not sure at this point any significant amount of outside influence will make a great deal of difference. We are sitting in a period of limbo right now with not knowing what the state's revenue will be. We know it will be down. We just don't know how far. I was on a call with a group of senators this morning, and a member or two of the forecasting board and the chambers of commerce, all dealing with this issue of what is this going to be. I hope that by July 20th, when the legislature comes back into session, we will begin knowing a little bit more about what the future holds, because I think it's all in the cards. I don't think there's opposition to the $10 million in the budget if the COVID situation had not hit us where it hit. The other thing that is too far in the weeds for everybody, but just remember this, we're all looking at the fact that the federal stimulus through the CARES Act is allocating $1.2+ billion to the state of Nebraska. The problem is how we get to use those funds. And so far, the CARES Act is very prescriptive, and you can only use those funds for direct COVID-related expenses. You can't use them to replace lost income. Our Representative Bacon from Omaha has introduced legislation in Washington that may get traction and could help loosen up the restrictions on the use of that money, and that could make a significant difference. Because right now, in conversations that we've had, it's going to be hard to find $1.25 billion of direct COVID expenses. You can only spend so much money on personal protective equipment. You can only do so much of that. So I think the jury's out, Matthew, on that. But I was
Senator,
really pleased. Yeah.
A follow-up question on that issue, and also related to housing, because obviously it's important, as you said, that we create more units, as we're already behind the curve on the number of units available. But in this whole situation, housing stability is going to be important. And I do know that for the CDBG money, as well as for some of that general $1.09 billion, there's been examples across the country of states using some of that for rental assistance to just keep people in the housing and keep that housing occupied, so we don't get some replay of that a lot of that eviction and mortgage crisis that we had a decade ago. Would that be something you would be supportive of? Not to put you on the spot, but that we could be helpful.
We're looking at that right now, and you're probably aware Senator Crawford is working on a letter to be sent to the governor on that particular issue. And it does appear that is a use of the COVID funds that would be allowable under the current restrictions. And I think certainly, housing security is clearly an issue. I see it in my day-to-day work in the banking side. One of my concerns has been where do we place the burden? If we allow people, if we forestall foreclosures, which means people don't make their house payments, then you've got the person that's supposed to be receiving those house payments that's getting behind the curve. I think the program here would try to hold everybody whole using taxpayer dollars, but it's still taxpayer dollars.
Thank you, Senator. You're a credit to the housing industry.
Well, as long as we don't steal any more money from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, right?
You're nailing it, knocking it out of the park.
Because there's none to steal.
That's right.
Okay, so any other questions for the senator? Okay, well, I'd like to do a little unpacking about today's discussion. If you travel, the term unpacking means you might be unpacking a new toothpaste or tube of toothpaste or a toothbrush, because if you're like me, you forgot. But in today's scenario, I'd like to unpack some of the thoughts that you're going to carry away with you from today's discussion and great interaction and questions. So what's an aha moment for you today as you've listened to the senator speak about this program and the success and moving forward, what's on the horizon for us as a state? What's an aha moment that really you're going to take away from this conversation? Or maybe what's one item that jumped out at you today?
You know, it spoke to me that Rick Nelson mentioned that the site selection consultants are saying now is the time to invest in your community and sites and be prepared for the opportunities that are coming. And I think that's really true. And I think whether this $10 million legislation passes this year or not, and we all know, you know, nothing's going to be normal this year. What if you start small? What if you raise what you would raise for match of that in the future and use it to flip one house and revolve it, or use it to build one house and revolve it, or use it to, you know, part of what's eligible in this is to take your downtown buildings and turn a second story into housing, repurpose. Is that, what is the word? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, you know, so if we can begin to do something small that we aren't tied up for a long time, so that we can turn it back into cash when that comes available, and we have cash match, raise the cash, start using it, be able to turn it back into cash so that you're ready for that opportunity. I think that's just huge. Building now for those opportunities and not just sitting on your hands saying, well, if it comes available, we'll see. I know for us, you know, we built a pilot house because we knew the funding was coming the first time, and we wanted to show DED that we could do it. But, you know, it was a darn good exercise. We learned a whole bunch. It was more valuable for us than it was to prove anything to DED. So I would really encourage people to begin to do something, small steps.
As you were talking, Sharon, the thought, luck is where opportunity meets preparation. That saying holds true, that to the outsider, it's just a lucky thing that you were able to accomplish this, but opportunity and preparation really have to be a part of that. Kathy shared an aha moment for her that she has a new person to connect with to ask more questions. So thank you, Kathy, for sharing that. And Karsten mentions that they're doing a gift certificate program, and they hope that it will provide 300,000 of injection of cash into their economy during these times. So I know that's going on in several communities, and it's just been a real blessing here in the Phelps County area as well. So what else? What's a takeaway for some of you? And like I said, we love to hear your voices, so feel free to open up your microphones. Well, as you're thinking about those, I just want to return to the Senator for a moment. Senator, we have your contact information on the screen there, but for those who maybe are joining us by phone, would you mind repeating how they can reach out to you?
Absolutely. The two best ways to reach out to me are either by phone or by email. The phone number at my office in Lincoln is 402-471-2642. Again, that's 402-471-2642. Or you can reach me at my email address, which is mwilliams@leg.ne.gov. Again, mwilliams@leg.ne.gov. And you're asking about an aha, and I don't have an aha quite, but I would say that I do have a really good friend who is a psychologist and has written a number of articles and books, and he has made the assumption, which I agree with, over a lengthy period of time, that human beings will only react in one of three ways when faced with adversity. They will either quit, they will blame, or they will step up and accept the responsibility of working together for positive change. Step up and accept the responsibility of working together for positive change. I think that's what we're all about, especially during difficult times. I've seen it with our schools, with our hospitals, and with many of our communities, that they are not willing to, even during these difficult times, quit. They recognize that blaming someone else for your problem never improves your situation. So they are stepping up. And I think that's the challenge, and for each one of us to encourage other people to step up. These are uncertain times, but as I started out, there can be great opportunities with these uncertain times if we are prepared. And remember, with preparation, you will never know if you are over-prepared. You will always know when you are under-prepared. And just think about that for a little bit. And then the fact that we have 100,000 people out of work today. We need to get Nebraska opened up and get people working again.
Okay. Thank you, Senator, for those words of thought and wisdom. Definitely something for us to ponder as we move forward. So I greatly appreciate that. So before we begin to wrap up today's webinar and look forward to next month's webinar, Senator, do you have any final thoughts you want to expand?
Well, I just, again, appreciate everybody's willingness to work on this. Many of the people, or several that were on the call today, testified at the hearing this year and were there and supporting these efforts. You know, if we keep working for the future, we'll be all right. And we'll look back and know that these were challenging times, but we met them head on.
Okay.
So thank you for inviting me to participate. I appreciate it.
You are very welcome, and stick around for a few more minutes here as we wrap up, if you would. So I just wanted to kind of ask you, if you grew up as I did watching Saturday morning cartoons on 3 local TV channels, you might remember the cartoon character Elmer Fudd. And Elmer was always on the hunt for that wascally wabbit Bugs Bunny. And so we here at SCED are a little bit like Elmer Fudd in the fact that we are always on the hunt too. We want great housing topic ideas for future webinars. And Senator Williams, you were a suggested topic, and wow, you've hit a grand slam for us today. So thank you for that. If you have ideas, a couple of you have reached out and given us some ideas for future topics. Feel free to contact Sharon or myself. Our information is there on the screen, as well as our main office number here at SCED. So we'd love to know what you have in mind. Is there an individual that we should invite to speak? Is there a community we need to hear from? We just want to be able to continue to bring quality content to those of you who join us every month. So looking forward to next month's webinar. We will be back here on June the 18th at 2 o'clock. And next month's topic really is in the form of a question. So you're going to have to join us to find the answer to this. But Casey Baylitz and Jason Kennedy from the Nebraska Community Foundation will be joining us and answering the question about how can charitable assets be a partner in local housing solutions. So that is definitely something you aren't going to want to miss next month on June 18th. So once again, Senator, thank you for joining us today, and you are welcome to come back anytime. You have always
Thank you very much.
Enjoyable to have and to talk with, and we greatly appreciate the time and the effort, as well as the service that you give to our state. So with that, are there any last questions or comments from everyone? Well, if not, thank you to every one of you again for joining us today. And I just wish you the best and have a great rest of your day. And we will see you here again in June. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.